Welcome to the Civic Circus podcast. I am Spencer Duncan.
I'm Clark Trammell.
Let's start the show.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, Clark, thank you for being here. We first met when we both ran for office. Me for the first time, maybe you for the first time. I never asked that question if you'd ever run for office before, but that about 8 years ago. It's the first time we met. We also have in common that we both married up. I think people like our wives way more than they like us, which is a good thing, right? That's why I married my wife, but thank you for being here.
Thank you, Spencer. It's good to see you. You and I do go back. We've had a lot of good conversations over the years, political, personal, business, and I'm really pleased about this. So thank you for the opportunity to sit here and have some conversation.
Yeah, I was glad you said yes. As I tell everyone who comes on here, I'm not here to listen to myself talk, and I'm not here to just talk to people who always say, "You're right, Spencer. You're right, Spencer." I mean, I like that. That's great, but that's not the purpose of this. It's to give other people in the community who have ideas a chance to throw those at me and at the community at large. And so I appreciate you doing it. As we always do, I start the show with kind of two topics that people are talking about or questions we're getting or things in front of the council. So we're going to start there. As I tell every guest, we'll talk about you here in just a little bit. But we start with the topics of the day as they were. The first is just that I want to bring up is just street repair in general. We've hit that summertime a period as we come out of the spring where there's obviously detours that lead to detours that lead to detours. I always try to tell people orange cones are actually a good thing. They mean progress. They're also extremely frustrating, but I'm sure you see that out there too. All the cones we got working.
We certainly have plenty of them. Yes, sir.
Potholes is the big one. Feels like fix our dang potholes. I promise we're doing it. I think the two things, the one project I know you're going to have some thoughts on, though, is Huntoon Street project, which they want to do similar to what they did to the 12th Street project, which you had very strong opinions on the 12th Street project. And now it's done. There's nothing we can do about it. But they want to do a similar deal to that on Huntoon Street to the tune of about $20 million and make it very similar. I have opposed that to this point. I believe we need to work on Huntoon. We need to do the work and do the infrastructure and clean it up. But I think we can do it for a little less than what's being proposed.
I think you have a lot of options to just do the work that needs to be done instead of using the plan you used on 12th Street. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, because I know I didn't have a chance to vote on 12th Street, although I tried to get him to reassess it because I had just gotten on the council at that time, and obviously I was not successful. And it's not that 12th Street's terrible, but again, it's what do we need versus what can we clean up versus total reconstruction, right?
Spencer, you being in politics and in your family and the background of this community, nobody ever talks about this, but there's an old line that I think is very apropos when you look at 12th Street and other projects. And if not, then it needs to be communicated to the taxpayer in a way that they understand and can get this off their neck. And that is, money buys votes, follow the money. There were some things with 12th Street that were very concerning, the fact that the public majority did not want it. There were vendors involved that are actively involved with the city that make a lot of money from contracts.
Don't get me sued, Clark. No,
I'm not going to get you sued, but it's got to be said. And when you follow the money, the image is that the good old boy network played the field against what the public wanted. And that still resonates and does not sit well. I'm not saying that happened, but that's the image that we have in this community outside your office where the taxpayers reside in their homes. And that needs to be put to rest. And it can be with good communication. The same thing with Huntoon. Nobody wants that done other than a few people that could benefit financially. Excuse me. And that's got to be rectified or resolved. There are problems. I travel that street all the time, and I'll tell you there's part of that probably none of you have talked about. And that is right there at Gage and Huntoon on the west side. The minute you start narrowing, if you do, Huntoon down on the east side, your traffic problem on the west side gets out of control.
Oh, sure.
And that's got to be looked at as part of anything that's done. So rather than just say we're going to go do this because some consultant gave us this book and everybody's following it, there's more to doing deals than just what the data says. It's how it's used. It's how the public feels about it. What we see in the database today was not what it was 5-10 years ago, nor will it be the same in 5-10 years ahead of us. So let's not build streets like where I live and around Topeka where everybody's got a narrow street and a one-car garage. Yeah. Well, we all have 2 cars and they're big and wide, and the minute somebody parks in front of your house, everybody's got to stop and let one lane go through. Think beyond that. We're beyond the one-car garage lifestyle. I'll leave it there because you may have some other things you want to say, but this is really poignant.
I think it partly feeds into my general philosophy of there's a lot of things that I think would be great, and I would love to have them, and I think they would be nice, but that's different than focusing on fixing what we have first in a practical way. And hey, if we get to the point where we've done all that, and then we can start building the fancy stuff, great. But we're not there yet. We're already behind on road projects. So if I can spend, I'm kind of throwing out numbers here because there is some infrastructure that needs done on Huntoon. But if I can spend $10 million, let's say, to get all that done and make sure that's done, and not 20, I can do a lot of good with that other $10 million on our other roads. And so it's not just for me, the Huntoon issue. It's just more of a general philosophy of fixing what we have, what we need before we start building what we kind of want.
Spencer, I'm with you all the way. I think you hit the nail on the head. There are projects, for instance, a big thing that sits in the craw of the public is the streets are such a mess in this town, and they never get better. They just seem to get worse and more of it. That why are we spending your $20 million in narrowing a street that needs to stay 2 lanes, but it does need repair work, and spend that money on projects of fixing the streets so they work and we all don't go to the shop all the time because our cars are out of alignment. And I agree with you. Let's spend $10 million, fix the potholes, make it look nice. We want the city to be pretty. It does need work, but that other $10 million could be dumped in immediately into doing more effective work on the roadways and byways in this city than spending it on that. That's not good, judicious, economic, fiscal planning.
I can mill and overlay a lot of roads for $10 million.
Yes, you can.
I've learned that on this city council. Now,
yes.
I've had no background in street roads, but I've learned a lot the last few years. The other project I want to warn people about, and I keep warning them, and it's a good project. I'm glad we're finally doing the Polk Quincy Viaduct. Why they ever built it that way, it's dangerous. There have been accidents through the years. It needed to be done. But I've warned everybody, they're finally really starting construction on that. And when people have said, oh, it'll be great, and I'm like, it will, but there's going to be about 1.5 years of not so great, and I don't even sugarcoat it. I warn people now, plan accordingly. If you have to come downtown, it's going to not be awesome when you have to come to this area. If you're prepared for that, it'll be fine. If you think you can just get through it real quick for that 1.5 years or year while they're doing it, not so much luck. Just prepare yourself for what's going to be a massive project routing a lot of traffic through the downtown area.
I agree, Spencer. And there again, this is going to be a common thread in this conversation is the failure of good communication and transparency to the public. What you said, I'm sure, is correct because I believe in you and I know you don't make decisions or vote for these things if they don't make good sense. So your credibility with me is A+. However, us in the public as taxpayers don't see why we're spending all that money to mess this up when other cities have mousetraps, they call them, or terrible intersections. You can go to Kansas City and they're everywhere. But you know what? They're not tearing them down and realigning them. We're just dealing with it. So why don't we just deal with what was there? It's too late now, rather than straighten something out that isn't as bad or any worse than when we travel to other places who have issues like that and they just deal with it. So what's happened is what you're saying, I concur for the reasons I said, but the public doesn't understand it. Nobody's thoroughly explained in a way, not just say it, but
Sure.
in a way that it's said that the public can understand it and then get on board with it. Because I think the community would. It's just we don't know enough to know any better than to bitch about it.
Well, it was a hard project to turn down in the sense that we are putting, as a city, about 20 million into it, but the state is picking up the other almost 300 million. And so it's kind of hard too to not, I don't know what, don't ask me to do math, Clark, but whatever the return on that investment is, 20 million gets us 300 million. I think we'd all take that at the casinos if we could. But so that was part of it too, is the state targeted as something they wanted to do if we could put that in. And so that also became well, sure, if you want to build a $300+ million project and all I have to quote unquote pitch in is 20, sure, that was hard to pass too.
Oh, totally understand the dollars and cents of it. Again, communication. Let us get to a point where we understand. Don't talk at us, but talk with us in a way that the public can get on board and support it. That theme follows through on so many decisions that are made that we, the city, can do better to help us do better as a team with the city.
The other thing I want to talk about is economic development. Because I will tell you, one of the biggest things I struggle with is finding a balance between when we should invest in economic development or what projects are worthy versus when we shouldn't. Because it's not public safety, it's not, roads necessarily, it's sort of a different category of itself, and where cities should and shouldn't invest their dollars. And I don't have a specific project on my mind at this point, but as those things come forward, and sometimes it's, where city dollars should be invested or not invested in economic development projects is a constant battle for me just to figure out what's good and what's not. And you have to take it project to project. But I know you have a background in economic development. And so I'm curious if you have thoughts about metrics and measures and things we should use as a city to determine this is worthy of our investment and no, stay away from this. And not
Absolutely.
Specific projects per se, but sort of just general ideas of how that should work.
I have been ingrained in entrepreneurialism since I was 16 years old. I had my first company as a partnership with a friend of mine in Wichita, Kansas, before I moved to Topeka. I ran the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, which was the economic development arm of the chamber, still is, that has now changed its name, but I took it from Brian Turner, and I gave it to Cindy Legg, and Cindy Legg then gave it to Glenda Washington, and Glenda Washington then turned it over to, I'm not sure who has it now.
Today it's Israel Sanchez.
But it's evolved in a way, but there's a lot of lip service that goes on with the entrepreneurialism and job creation. I was hired to consult and then come in and take over that program. We had an incubator. We had 2 incubators. They were a mess because money was being spent, but not spent effectively and correctly. But anyway, we went through that phase. Lazone Grays, who was your guest last week, last podcast, wonderful man. There is a citizen that deserves the gold medal from Topeka and a day called Lazone Grays Day. He has done so much, as has the Gill Foundation, as have many other entities. I guess there's a new group called the Omniplex.
Yeah, OmniCircle.
OmniCircle. I'm not familiar with them, but I've read what they want to do. In theory, it's great. But bridging it from theory to practice has always been the problem we've had with the incubators and the space makers in this town. There's a reason for that, which I'll mention to you. 70% in the United States of all jobs and employers are brought about through economic development and small business. That's huge. Add that formula to Topeka and you look around, and other than the franchises, every store you go to and every shop you see is a small business in this town. Yeah. This is a small business community. Yeah. We have resources, but our problem has always been, and in my opinion still is, of communication to the community through the right vehicles, supporting the right people who can get the message out, to bring the entrepreneurs to the table, educate them, and move them forward with a longer term plan, not just here you go, good luck, but here you go, hand in hand for year 2, year 3, hopefully by year 4, you're on your own, year 5, you're doing well, or we know when to close the doors. We're not going to, we were funding people into failure.
Yeah.
And that's part of what you're asking. How do you not do that? The way you not do that is you don't play politics. You look at people and you say, it doesn't work, can't do it. I'm sorry you don't like it. You don't like the answer, but I'm helping you because I don't want you to fail. Or you're in the wrong spot, or you got the wrong product. It's not green, it should be red. It shouldn't be on 1st Street, it should be on 10th Street. You need to have tough conversations that people don't put their feelings on their shirt sleeves and will allow that conversation to feed into them. A big problem this city has in that mindset, and I'm going to give you an answer, and I'm going to give you a proposal that I made to the chamber board years ago, on and on and on, when I was involved with the chamber directly. And that is, why do we not have women-owned, minority-owned, smaller businesses that could thrive and grow? Why are they not able to get past Kansas Boulevard?
Oh, yeah. Right.
The reason is
What? We're bigger than just that street?
they
What?
can't afford the leases.
Yeah.
There's an answer. You can see where this is going. There's a way to put funds together to supplement the venture that needs to move west into spaces that they can't afford today, but they can grow and develop into something that can afford it and create jobs. I created 300 jobs and probably about 112 new companies when I was in that position. None of them failed like they were failing before. Now, some of them still
Well, sure. There's always a
still
failure.
aren't around, but the way you do this is that fits into whatever model we put together in this city, because the model we have now is nice, a lot of lip service, makes everybody feel good to say we do this.
Yeah.
But how many jobs are we creating?
Right.
How many jobs did we create this year that 3 years are still here, 4 years are still? The numbers go in the wrong, they go in reverse. Do what's called spot incubation. I take you and you say, Clark, I've got this widget. I underwrite it. I'm smart enough. There are smart people in this city. You've got Washburn. You got Washburn Tech. You've got all kinds of talent
Oh, yeah.
here
No shortage of folks wanting
that
to do
can
that.
underwrite, do a business plan, put the mechanics together, look at the individual, look at their credit, look at their financials, see what they need, and then fill those voids. Find the spot in Topeka that they're comfortable with, but that works for them to maximize their business at the next level and beyond, and help fund and subsidize their lease to get them there and get them going. Spot incubation, underwriting, smart people. Get all these resources together and form a separate corporation of all these different talents, the chamber, the city, Lazone, Omni, whomever, and put them together in an entity that has teeth to what it says, has funding to make it work, and I guarantee you this city will build and build and build on the success and the ventures of small business. It's there. We're just not doing it right.
Well, and I think, working capital becomes, people can scratch up enough money to pay the first 6 months of that rent, but then that leaves them no extra cash if something goes wrong. They have no capital to work from in that time period, so they get crunched, and the 6 months go by, and so to your point, if you can help them with that first year or two of the lease,
Correct.
it frees up their capital for the rest of the business to help it develop. The other thing I've been a little frustrated with is we have some organizations, and the chamber hears me say this every year to them. They haven't done it yet, but I'm going to keep hammering is they give loans. There's some money that go to small business loans for these folks through that organization or others. I think the mistake in that is we need to find a bank who's willing to be the connecting who gives that loan. It can be backed with the money from these outside groups. But what happens is once they pay that money back to the organization, that's great, but they've still built no credit up with a lending institution or built a relationship with a lending institution. So when they are maybe ready to expand, the banks say, well, we don't have any history with us. Well, I could have if that $10,000 I was given and paid back had been through a bank, not through a local organization like the chamber. And it's not a knock on them, but if we're going to help these businesses, we also need to help them build up those banking relationships, which help them grow in the future too. And so every year I go to them and say, let's get a bank and help do it through the bank. And so I'll keep pushing that rock up the hill every year too.
Well, and you know this, there's an old statement in business, and it's very simple. Do it right, and do it right the first time. If you can't do it right and they don't have the funding or the funds aren't available, when I used to teach entrepreneurs and economic development, I would tell every entrepreneur who wet behind the ears, starry-eyed, there's two things that you need to have in place before you start anything. Besides a good idea and a good location, is time and money. If you're not willing to commit the time, you need to understand the lights don't go on if you don't turn the switch.
Yeah.
See, a lot of people look at you like, God, I didn't think about that. The other is money. You have to capitalize effectively. Back in the day when I was involved with this, with the chamber, we had the Kauffman Foundation, wonderful group out of Kansas City. We had a program, which I don't know if it still exists or not, maybe it does, called First Step Fast Track. Glenda Washington and Deborah Dawkins, two wonderful minority women professionals here in town, came to me and we put together a partnership. They ran the program. That was their job. They took the responsibility for it. I worked with the city, who at that time through HUD provided scholarships to pay the fees that were part of the $2,500 fee to get into the program. We could have 18 students. The years I was with the chamber, we had a full class every 6 months. We were one of the top programs in the United States. So the training is there, or if it isn't today, we can bring it back for those that are just getting started. Learn accounting, learn business, learn a business plan, understand time and money, POS, point of sale equipment, so on and so forth. And hold their hand when they need it, or take those that don't need so much hand holding. They just need direction and support and a location to go forward. The money's out there. We've got some wonderful foundations here in town.
Yeah, we do.
That could be brought into the mix to help fund into part of this process. So I guess long story short, Spencer, the tools are here. The talent is here to educate, train, and bring entrepreneurs forward. The programs are available if we want to implement spot incubation and programs like that. And don't just do it for a feel good, do it for a success. These are building blocks that this city would just thrive on because all the tools are there. We just haven't put them together the right way.
Yeah. All right, we're going to turn the attention to you a little bit.
Ouch.
Yeah, no, that should be easy, right? So tell us how you got to Topeka. What brought you here?
Well, I have a great career I've been blessed with, but what brought us here was I was at a point when we were living in Denver at the time, and I had finished what I was doing in Denver, getting the company sold that I had taken over in transportation, and sold it, and I was done with the work I was doing. And my wife and I, her mother had recently passed, and they're from here. Bobby's from here. And so during her funeral, they're from McLeod and Perry and Oskaloosa, and they came from there and moved this way. And then her dad came from here and out of Houston and Mexico, and they lived in the Bottoms, and his sister. And so we're part of my family, my wife's side, has a lot of family here, and we're from Topeka. Always liked Topeka. Always liked Bobo's.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So we always drove by her house, which is over here on Randolph Avenue. Great location. And I stopped and I said, let me look inside, because having been in construction and development and banking and finance, you just have a feel about property. And I looked at it and I said, I think this house is empty and I think somebody's remodeling it. And I would bet you it's probably for sale. So I looked in the garage and there was a toolbox sitting in the middle of the garage. So I called Lawyer's Title here in town. I said, I need to know who owns that property. He gave me his name. I called him up. I said, it looks like your house is for sale. What are you doing? He says, yeah, I'm remodeling it. I'm flipping it. And it is for sale. And I said, well, I'll tell you what. Tell me what you want for it. And he said, what? I said, yeah, tell me what you want for it. And so I went in and paid part of the rehabilitation cost to get the house where it needed
You
to
actually
be.
move into it.
So I could get a loan on it.
Oh, yeah,
because
sure.
Because I wanted to
we're going to
finance.
give you an unfinished.
Well, yeah, that wasn't going to work. And at that point in time, there was more money chasing less loan products, so it was not hard to find capital in those days.
So how long ago was that?
So anyway, that
How
was
many
in
years ago was that?
2002.
Okay.
So I bought that house and gave it to my wife on her birthday in 2002.
Okay.
And we moved into the Senate, and I came here and went to work for Yellow Cab at the time and cleaned up that little taxi company and put it back in a profitable mode and gave it back to the owner. Was there for a year. We spent $160,000 remodeling this house, total over improvement, but we loved Topeka and we were willing to invest here. And so that's how we got here, was she moved back into the home that she grew up in that her dad built. So don't let anybody ever tell you can't go back home. You can. And it's interesting. I got to share this with you. When I moved back, I found so much opportunity for quality work or involvement. And people need to understand that about Topeka. I would go talk to people and introduce myself, and they say, why are you moving to Topeka? They didn't understand what is here. I love this town. It's a great place to be. And we are so happy. This was a destination for us. It wasn't for a job. It wasn't because we had to move here to go live with family.
Yeah.
We moved here because we wanted to be here. And we don't regret 1 minute of that. So that's how we got here.
No, that's great. So you need more of those stories. We got to encourage more of these people to move back. Get our population up a little bit.
Do the things we're talking about and going to talk about, and it'll happen.
Yeah. So as you've transitioned, and you've kind of talked about a little bit of your history, your career, and your experience, but now these days, you substitute teach, correct?
I do.
So what is that like these days, walking into these classes? So I substitute taught for 3 years.
That's right.
When I was getting my master's degree. And, I learned really quick, don't send me into a kindergarten classroom. In fact, about 5th grade, middle school and high school, I had no problems with. 5th grade, I was all right. If you got me in kindergarten through 3rd grade, it was not good for me, not good for them. And I started saying, you don't want to send me to those little kids. And I like kids. I got kids. You get too many of them, and my brain was not the little ones. And so that was so for 3 years. So I did a lot of middle school and high school, but I see so I don't know if you've had limits on what you do, but just talk about what that experience has been, what you've learned going into schools now, and kind of how those kids react to you when you get there.
My wife at the school that I'm focused on, and I've substituted at several because I just wanted to see what the school was like.
Yeah.
That's just me. My background has been such that I've always loved the challenge, and I always wanted the most dynamic challenge in front of me to see if I had the skills I thought I had to do what I thought I could do. So my wife taught there. She was a teacher. I was always her grip in theater, and was with her through all of her career, and just kind of had a feel about school. And she was a great mentor. So I had this wonderful mentor for me. And so when she retired, I had a lot of things that I wanted to do. I started 3 new businesses here in Topeka during that process. And one thing led to another, and I got older, and I'm getting older. And I said, one thing I've always wanted to do is I love to teach. I love people. But where's the biggest challenge? And the biggest challenge, I believe, is middle school. The transition years, both emotionally, who you are. Your ears get big, your neck gets long, your legs get short, your body changes.
Teachers used to tell me, they used to call it the hard hat years.
The hard
As a
hat,
teacher, you had to wear your hard hat into middle school.
All of a
'cause-
sudden, there are girls and girls are boys, and you've got all this emotion, and now we've got a lot of baggage that comes with the families. And this school's in Central Topeka, and it's probably the most difficult school to teach at in that respect. But the staff that's there are absolutely fabulous. Principal is just second to none. So I wanted to go there for the challenge. I believe in kids, and I'm at a point in my life where I want to do what I can to give back with what I have to give back with. And one of those things is youth need leadership. Youth needs to look up to, in middle school at least, need guidance, especially in this school. And schools like it, it's not the only one. It's pretty much prevalent until you go to private.
Right.
Public school is what it is. But so I got in there, and it absolutely was just it's a different kind of war, because you've got classroom full of kids, all of with different personalities that have ADD, ADHD. It runs rampant. I don't care what school you're in. It's just what's in society. I wanted to touch base with as many kids as I could, and in a school where I could understand their rules, their processes, become part of a group that knew me and I knew them, where you could say, hi, how are you? And if I needed something, the help was there. And I love it. I absolutely get so thrilled to be around these kids, as difficult as it is. At the end of the day, if I had hair, I'd pull some patches of it out. I mean, you got to be careful what you said. I deal with SPED kids, children that are so challenged that really shouldn't be in public school. But we've got no child left behind. And so you've got kids that tear the room up. You got to call people in to take control of them. You've got other kids that have different learning disabilities, but they have abilities. And Spencer, I would take these kids as a group to gym, and they morphed into kids that were like all the other kids, running and playing, and they fit in, and nobody looked at them like they were different and they were slow or not with the pro. And it just makes your heart beat so fast with happiness to see real life come back for these children. And then you go into these other classes where you look at these kids and you know they're smart and they don't want to read. They want to put their head down, or they don't want to get along, or they're not going to learn, and you learn how to deal with that. Okay, well, here's what we're going to do. You make the decision. Do you want to do the classwork in class, or do you want to do it in the office? It's your decision, not mine. You tell me what you want to do, and we'll do that. Yeah. All of a sudden, things change. So you learn these little rules.
Well, it's hard, too, because you're not their everyday teacher.
That's right.
So they're already pushing you anyway.
You are the
like,
substitute.
You're the substitute. So what are what boundaries can we push that we normally aren't supposed to do? And so you probably have to set that tone early, but also in a way that doesn't turn them off first thing you get there, because you still got the whole day, or you have a couple days with them. And so I'm sure that was always the challenge for me. Like, all right, how can I set a tone today that doesn't turn them off, but understands we're still going to do work today. I'm still
Absolutely.
the teacher of the day.
Well, pretty soon you get high fives and I missed you and my favorite sub, and get hugs, and you kids walk down the hall and go, how are you, mister? I mean, our youth are the future of our country, and we have a responsibility to do everything we can to educate, to focus, to deal with them with their family, personal growth problems, issues, and give them the best chance they can have to be what they want to be successfully. And that's why I do this, because it's my way of giving back while I can.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I was asked a question today by somebody on our city staff, and I'm going to throw it at you because you may have some perspective on this. And really the question was simple. Okay, Councilman, if you had to pick the 3 priorities of the city, obviously we can chew gum and walk at the same time, despite what some people believe. We can do it when we really focus. But if I had to pick 3 things I want to tell staff, these are top of the list. And so I thought about that. But I'm curious, if I throw that question at you, you know, if you could say today, okay, what are 3 things the city of Topeka should be focusing on right now? You know, understanding we're still doing all the other stuff, but if we had to rise some things to the top where we could put some resources and time and a little more effort.
Spencer, I could give you a list of about 100.
Well, I know that was my problem too, so we won't hold you to it.
Let me.
But it gives you a chance to at least bring up a couple things.
Let me pick some of those out. First of all,
failing or we're succeeding and need to do better. And
this city, first of all, needs to organize and structure itself so it runs efficiently and effectively. By doing that, a lot of the list of my 100 things will resolve themselves because they're line items underneath leadership, good management, structure, organization, etc. With that is your budget. A question I'll ask you now or later is, what does it really cost to run this city? We've got a budget that says it's $300 million, but then when you add all the debt of borrowing with bonding, this and this, you got to add that to what your budget is. What is that number? Is it $800 million to run the city? I don't know, but I don't think we know, and I don't think the city council knows because nobody's asked that question, and that answer has not been given. But be that as it may,
I'll write that down, by the way.
We need to understand and put together a budget that works and a business plan on that budget to implement, even if it doesn't fund completely the first year or second year. We get out of the dirt by year 3, 4, and 5, and we're in the clear. We're not doing that. We're managing by crisis. We're Band-Aiding the budget. We've got to fix it. The other parts of that, to answer your question, organization and budget, financing, et cetera, is, and it's not just my pet peeve, it goes deep. Code enforcement is a disaster in this city.
Yep.
Code enforcement is what creates the quality of our neighborhoods and adds to the quality of life and appearance and how we think of ourselves. If we get code enforcement to function effectively with the right laws that allow them to do what they need to do and say, well, we can't go there, we can't do, let's do away with the can'ts. Let's do away with that and do it. So we are effectively enforcing codes with the right codes, doing the right thing at the right place with the right time. That cleans up a whole lot of trauma in our community from every aspect.
No, I'm with you on code. We can do a whole show just on issues with code enforcement. And I'll tell you, one of the most frustrating things, and I understand we have a lot of really good staff, and our capacity is only so much at times, and I do get that. But on the code enforcement side, especially when it comes to these abandoned homes and properties who owners died and it's in probate or out of probate and family loves, what I hear is, yes, we could do that, Councilman, but it's hard. And my response every time I hear that is, oh, well, it's hard. Well, let's just go home and give up and walk away. Yeah. Of course it's hard. Yeah, this is hard stuff. But if you're not willing to understand that and be ready to deal with hard, that's fine. This may not be the gig for you, right? Like, there's other places you can go work or be a elected person at, but if you're willing to say, yes, it's hard, but, and I don't hear the but as much as I'd like to sometimes. It's hard, but we're going to deal with it.
Well, let me give you a couple of code issues. One, things that need to change, that can change. Just somebody needs to pay attention to what's going on, get in there, get a group together, rewrite it, get it approved, go wherever you got to go to court or out to the Capitol. I don't care. Yeah. Get it fixed. If you have a junk car on your driveway that deteriorates the value and the image of the community and the neighborhood, if it's parked where the headlights are facing the street, code enforcement can't go on the property and see what the tag or if it's tagged or anything like that. So they don't touch. If you have a race car that is on your property, you can put it in your front yard or wherever it doesn't belong. Race cars aren't considered an automobile and covered under code unless they've changed it, but it didn't used to be covered.
I don't think we've changed it, and that's the first I've ever heard of that.
And so you got things in the code that need to be cleaned up so they can be dealt with, and not just dealt with, but dealt with in a timely, efficient manner. We have a guy down my street that parks his 18-wheel cab on the street. Those are illegal.
Yep.
Okay. It was reported to code enforcement a month ago. Guess what?
Still there.
Still there. That's inexcusable.
Well, and this is a loophole that we have to fix too. And I don't know if that happens in this case, but I'll give you an example. Code goes and they say to them, it's there, it's illegal, we're going to cite you. So let's say this, and they say, oh, I'll move it. And they move it and they drive it around the block and they bring it back an hour later. And code now says, well, that's a new ticket. So we can't, the last one doesn't count. And I'm like, that makes no sense.
It's ridiculous.
People are abusing the system. So to your point, we have to close those loops so that people can't do that. They understand the spirit of the law. And as long as we let them get away with it, they're going to continue to get away with it. That is human nature.
Well, it's like parking on the lawn. If I throw some gravel down, it's okay for me to park on the lawn. No, it's not. You got to have a pad. You got to do it the right way. And that I absolutely agree with you, Spencer. And I got an answer for you too.
Okay. I need all the answers I can get.
They say our budget can't afford more code enforcement officers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it can. Yeah. And the way you do it, why not go out and hire seniors that are looking for something to do, train them on running through certain neighborhoods and reporting things that the code enforcement officer would have to report, but do the arms and legs work.
Yeah.
Turn your report in, they look at the reports, and then they focus on what they need to do to go take care of the business rather than making 2 or 3 stops. Code enforcement's only doing one. Yeah. Pay the senior maybe $10 an hour. I don't know. But there are a lot of healthy seniors, one sitting at the table here, I'm not looking for a job, who would be very good at that. And there you've got a workforce that costs you little to nothing doing your arms and leg work so your key people that you can't afford to hire any more of can do what they're hired to do. There's an answer for you.
No, that's great.
There you go.
That's why we do this.
Okay.
All right. So you got some questions for me. As I tell everybody, I never know what I'm about to be asked. I tell you specifically, don't tell me so that it can be, so you can catch me off guard or not. And that's how it should be. So I tell people if I really know what I'm talking about or not. Did he even answer the question?
Well,
if not, I just tell him to cut the feed and we'll edit it out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we don't edit anything out. That's the.
Okay. Spencer, why did we buy this hotel? One, part 2 of it was a business plan done, and if not, why not? As part of the due diligence in making an intelligent, effective decision. Part of the problem, I'll say, is that you have people who vote on it that know nothing about hotels or how they work. So maybe they should have said, we shouldn't do this because we don't understand it and we should walk away from it. So why?
Yep. I'll give you my why and what some of the
business plan.
Right. Some of the moving parts at the time. And I've told people, I wish every vote I took was perfect, but I am fallible. And if I look back at a couple of votes I've taken, that is one that I say I might have voted wrong, but I stand behind every vote I take. I always caveat that with, I don't run from my votes. You got to own the votes you take. I've told folks, but in retrospect, I tell folks at the time, we got some information from a city manager who's not with us anymore. That's not why he's not with us, but it turns out some information we were given was not exactly accurate. We also thought at the time we had a partnership going into it with the county that fell apart literally kind of right before the auction happened, and we were already in at that point. So that's been a disappointment. We've worked through that with the county, but that would have made a difference too, I think. And we had support from the community, at least the businesses. I mean, the Lodging Association itself came to us and said, this event center, which the county had just spent $50 million of taxpayer money on to renovate, has a multitude of events that will not come to it, which is still true if there's not an operating hotel. And the other folks who were looking at buying it were not going to continue to operate it long-term as a hotel. So that goes back to what we started with. This is one of those gray areas that I struggled with. Is this economic development we should invest in? And at the time, knowing all those factors, my thought was it's the only convention center in Topeka. The county had already invested all of our taxpayer money in that facility. We need to make sure it stays an asset to the community and that we as a capital city don't lose that asset, right? That was where my head was at the time.
I understand.
Right. Now, the couple of pledges I've always made since then, I'll get to your business plan thing here in a minute, is I've always said our goal is to sell it, and we are on that path right now into somebody who we know will operate it long term as a hotel and put the money into it. And that's the second piece. Yes, we have put money into it for maintenance and paying staff. We have not put money into it to renovate the rooms or, we fixed the elevator, done the ADA compliant stuff, made sure the employees got their paychecks. But we haven't, trust me, anyone who stays there tells you, yeah, they haven't renovated these rooms yet, right? So, and I've stayed committed to that. I am not going to put taxpayer money into the renovation of it. All right. So that's kind of how we got here. And I can go more, but that's the short version of where we got there. Well, no, was there a all-out business plan prior? Yes and no. So what we did have, the city did not do its own specific business plan. There were entities who had been looking at it, including the auction house who had it, which wasn't an auction house, it was a bank. It had been in receivership, who had put together some prospectus of how it would run, and the company that was running it had put together the financials of the last 10 years. So you didn't just have the last couple, you had a 10. So those kind of financials were available to show it had been profitable until COVID hit and then receivership. But up until then, for 30 years, the thing made money and it was doing just fine. It just got old. So there were those kind of financials. There was not a full-on business plan. Once we purchased it, we did put together that business plan showing for the next person who buys it, here's the history of the hotel. Here's what needs to be put into it. It needs to be branded, flagged with some actual flag. And if you do those things and put in this much money, it can be successful. I mean, there's folks, not me, let me be very clear, who've said, well, if it's going to be that successful, the city should just put the money. And I'm like, no. We don't want to be in the hotel business. I'm not spending your money on it. But so we've seen that stuff after the fact. There were financials prior, but no, it was not a full-fledged business plan.
Your theory, here's a perfect example of theory and practice. The theory was right, understanding the event center, et cetera, but the practice did not fit. And that's why people do business plans. And I would take it a step further. I appreciate what you said. I have owned hotels, small, large, et cetera.
You want to buy one?
No, I don't. That's why I don't have them. And I dealt with them for other people, and I fixed them, resolved them. I understand how they work. And I knew when this was going on that you have a group of people that know nothing about running a hotel that made a decision they shouldn't have made. And they need to understand, I hope they're listening to this, that if you don't understand it, don't vote for it. Don't vote for anything that you clearly don't understand. And if you have questions, ask them. Nobody called and asked me if I'd come out and talk to you all and work with you or anybody else in this city that's ever owned a hotel. And they should have. Yeah. But be that as it may, we've got it. You got to deal with it. You answered my question, and I appreciate it. I think it was a bad decision. I think it still is a bad decision. You all are probably going to take it in the shorts and write off some money and not get the flag that you want. But that hotel needs to succeed.
I think we will. I knock on this table, right? This wood table. I do think in the folks we've talked to, we can get back our money, and I think we can get what we want. Because again, I think the one thing I'll leave us on is I think the misnomer of that facility, because of the last 5 years, is that it's never going to make money. And again, if you look at the 30 plus year history, that's just not true. And what happened again were two things at once. COVID hit, which the world exploded. Yep. And the people who bought it went bankrupt, but not because of Hotel Topeka. They went bankrupt because they owned a bunch of other hotels, and then COVID hit and their whole operation just collapsed. And so then it spent several years in receivership. And anyone who knows receivership, they don't care. They don't maintain anything. They're just there to keep the doors open until they can sell it. And so we had this lull period. The good news is legitimate hoteliers who've now had time to do what the city didn't do, which is put together the business plan and assess the property, have looked at it and said, well, hell, the county's put their investment into this. If we can get our hands on this and put that flag on it, the history of this hotel says it will make money. Now, I hope they're right, because I believe as a city, it's good for us to have that facility be in our conference center, but I also know that that's not what the city should be doing. And I know a lot of people, and they're probably right. Hindsight's awesome, and so I know there were people at the time who thought it was bad, so it wasn't even hindsight, right? So that's why I try to lay out where my head was at the time, and if I had a time machine, who knows, right? But I don't. And so all I say to people is judge us on what we're doing now to correct our error as we move forward on it.
Very good.
And that's all I can ask for, you know. And then out of that, people get to make the decisions they want to make, and we go from there. And that's how the process works.
Now, I have another interesting question. In
Yep.
fact, I've got several, but I know we
No,
don't
you're
have that
good.
much time. But and those who listen to this podcast need to get a grip on this. Every community is comprised of 4 cornerstones, and I'm going to a question with this.
Yeah, you're good.
Quality of healthcare, quality of education, cost of living, quality of life, and the 4th leg is transportation. The better transportation is, the stronger and more successful the other 3 cornerstones become. Our city has a bus company that's very limited. I sat on that board for a while. I have turned transportation companies around and brought them into successful modes. I understand it. This city can do more, especially for seniors. When we all get older, folks, something you're really going to think about is transportation. How do I get to the doctor? How do I get to the store? How do I get to go shopping when I want to go shopping? How do I get to go to the park? Where does public transportation fit into that? So here's my question to you. Why isn't the city more engaged with TMTA in dealing with a very effective transportation mode for our city? Part of our problem is the way the city's laid out. We've got limitations that make it difficult to do everything for everybody. But we also have an industry area of town that we don't have any real effective bus transportation to that can take people to work to help them employ and help people get jobs from the east side of town over to the southwest side of town. Why isn't the city more engaged with transportation?
The honest answer is it's easier to pass the buck.
There you go. Can't
Right.
pass the buck.
Because
Damn it,
it's
that
easier to
doesn't
say,
work.
you know, no, and I agree. And, you know, they're their own entity to some degree, although we appoint the board. They have their own taxing authority. And so I think over the years, it's been easier to just say, hey, I hear you, but go talk to them. They're their own entity. They have their own taxing authority. Go talk to them. The problem is, I'm sure I knew this before I got on city council, but as I've learned through the years, more importantly, the direct connection between those other 3 pillars you mentioned and transportation, right? So quality of life is, can I get around the city, period, if I don't have a vehicle, right? And that's how I grow the city. Workforce development and jobs, right? If I can't get to work, if I don't have a bus that runs at night and I got people on 3rd shift, how are they going to get there? It's very expensive. If they have to spend a large chunk of the money they're going to make that night just to get an Uber or a Lyft or a transport over to work, that's already, they're starting the day behind, right? When they go on that shift. Healthcare, to your point, people who can't drive or don't drive, how do they get their doctor's appointments? How do they get around for the healthcare piece of it? It's got to be public transportation. And so we have ceded that piece of it to this private entity or this separate entity that we created, probably historically, so we didn't have to take on that responsibility. And that is a fault of, to your point, how we've structured this thing, because it does deflect some of that from those of us who need to step in and say, I know you've got limited resources or capacity, but you got to do better. And so, yeah, I think that's why historically it's gotten that way, is because it's easier to tell people, oh, go talk to them.
Well, let's rewrite history and fix that. And the city can. I asked you a question, you've answered it, and I appreciate that. But it was a truthful answer, but not an acceptable answer, because the engagement has got to be there. The city has the muscle to move these things forward. The independent receptacles on the other end, like TMTA, doesn't. A partnership of us moving together works well both ways. And why not? Why not effectively work with TMTA to set up a cab service underneath, because we really don't have cab service anymore. They kind of went away, Capital City and Yellow Cab.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that an Uber type service underneath TMTA couldn't be in place, where you have independent contract vehicles driving around doing cab service to take those people that don't live on a bus line to where they need to go, rather than have to call Joe or Mary or their church or whatever. These things are resolvable. We just have to, want to do it, and two, have the mentality and the skill set of the people making decisions to implement a business plan to get it done. There's your answer.
And I think to your idea, what's interesting about that is one of the issues, one of many, but is it's harder to find bus drivers. But part of that's because they have to get a different license to drive a bus.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just had to drive a van or a regular vehicle, that just requires a basic, like you don't have to do the extra work to learn to drive a bus. And so that system would probably have a better chance of finding even more drivers for it. Wouldn't have that same issue.
Oh, yeah. The people that want a second income, or the same people that drive Uber.
Right, that are doing Uber and Lyft will be like,
that.
Sure, put me on to some shifts of that.
Okay, I've got a third question.
Yep, here we go.
Third one, actually, if you'll...
The easy one. What's my favorite color? I got this.
If it goes into a fourth one, then I'll wrap up my questions. But why didn't the city become more involved with Heartland Park in retaining it in some sort of arbitration, involvement, conversation, give somebody a big hug and work with them? Why? It's the same thing with the hotel. Why did we allow that to happen?
So it's a slightly different situation in that theirs was generally a tax dispute.
Understand.
And they had litigation with the county, of which, even though we collect property tax, as you know, we don't assess it, and we don't actually as a city control that piece of the system. That's been ceded to the counties under state law. And so their direct dispute was with the county. We actually, I believe, talked at one point with the owner and said, well, what if we could do something about the city's piece of tax that's owed? And the response was, it's such a small piece compared to the other entities combined, because remember, there's 8 different property tax entities in Shawnee County,
right,
that yes, that would be nice, but it doesn't solve our overall issue. And that's the only piece we had an opportunity to give them any relief on if we thought we could save them. And so I won't say that was a direct, but it was kind of turned down, not in a mean way, but that doesn't make sense for us as owners of this property. And so we really could only sort of sit back and watch the county and the owner go through that battle. Because again, unless the citizens wanted us to own a racetrack, right, which we litigated years ago, and I don't think people want us to buy into a racetrack anymore. They want us to buy us a hotel as much as it was people enjoyed it. That was really our only recourse, was to see what property tax relief we could give, and our piece of that pie wasn't big enough to make an impact for the ownership group. I will also tell you, I think watching that process, knowing that owner who owned it a little bit, who was at that time also building a new facility, which he now is helping to operate, I feel like also there were days where he already had one foot out the door. That's the nicest way I can put it. And so I think some of those conversations weren't always as genuine as they needed to be by all parties involved. But I think at the end of the day, I'm not sure we knew what tools we had as a city that would have, outside of offering some property tax relief on our end.
In fairness to this question, I know that racetrack extremely well, and him and the whole history. I watched it unfold the first time. I was with the chamber at the time. I saw that debacle happen, and then this came on, and I saw this mess take place. I've been out to racetrack. I have a very close friend that's got 32 years of employment out there, knew that track left, right, the history. Was very close with him, kept me informed. I went out and talked to him, worked with him. And there was so much tourism generated or to be generated as the future grew that his ego got out of check, the owner, and it got sideways with the powers that be here and the taxing, and it just all got to be a sandbox issue rather than a business issue. And where I'm at, and I appreciate what you're saying, because what I'm seeing here missing is a lack of communication, both from the leadership, the county and the city, to the community, and the transparency involved with communication, as well as a lack of work within the confines of leadership to resolve issues. Because this issue could have been resolved if somebody would have said, let's get here together. The city's sitting there going, what is the problem and what are our options to fix it? And county, that includes you guys, and get your hard hats off and let's get here and think. Let's keep this here. Let's do something. But those conversations don't happen that way. And Spencer, they can. I know you and people, the skill sets are there. We just got to want to do that. And if we don't know how, somebody knows how. Just hold my hand and take me with you and I'll learn.
Yeah.
So the fourth part of this that I wanted to bring to you is in economic development and building the city. This all fits together.
Yeah.
We have an entity called Visit Topeka.
Yep.
I get major brochures from Wichita, from Kansas City, from Omaha, from other places. I never get anything from Topeka, about Topeka like that, going out to other people.
Oh, gotcha.
We have so much lip service through how we don't market this city rather than market this city. And I want to know why the city doesn't get more engaged with tourism in the hospitality industry and pulling these people together and either giving them leadership or guidance on what needs to be done. For instance, the racetrack, one of the biggest revenue generators we had at the time, or one of the big ones, Visit Topeka wasn't even engaged with them. I never did understand that. This is ridiculous. So if you all have to put a fire under somebody, take the leadership as you all are designed to be for Topeka and lead it and do these things. Do the tourism, do the lobbying, find out what they need, why it doesn't work, give them guidance, and make it work. You guys have the muscle to do it.
Well, and we have the purse strings, right? And that's where the power is.
So
right?
why aren't we doing it?
And so some of that money that Visit Topeka uses is tax dollars through the transient guest tax that's collected that then goes to them to bring people in to continue to generate revenue for the transient guest tax, and they use some of those dollars. They're also some privately funded, but they do receive taxpayer money. And to your point, I mean, that's how we can address that issue, is tell them, if you continue to want the money, these are the changes we need to see, and if not, fine, I'll take the money back and I'll do it in-house, right?
Absolutely.
And use that as the leverage to get some progress.
Do that. That's exactly what needs to happen. I appreciate that. But you and I talking about it, and you and 8 other people, they've got to get off their back ends and do these things. That's what they're there to do. Yeah. Period.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I'm with you. Okay.
All right, we're getting towards the end.
Well, darn, I was just getting warmed up.
We always do a couple emails that I've gotten in the last week. I have you read them to me, and then we can talk about them a little bit. I'll try to answer them, but let's start with email 1 there.
Okay, Councilman Duncan. This RTS fee is ridiculous. ? Exclamation. Why do I have to pay it? ? What are you going to do about it?
So the RTS fee is the readiness to serve charge, and it's on everybody's water bill. And a few years ago, the council voted to increase water rates. Duncan did not. I voted no. I understood that we need money to pay for our infrastructure, but I had a various plan that rolled it out over 10 years instead of a big rate 5 years, and all my plans were rejected. And that's okay, right? That's the process, I guess. But I voted against it in general. And one of the things I really didn't like in that, and I've been getting this question a lot because this readiness to serve RTS fee went in about a year ago. And it was an increase. It was a previous fee named a little different, but it was a significant increase. And a lot of folks have complained because if you have a property that there's no water at right now, those abandoned properties we talked about, and that's fine. There's some of them are commercial, and there's various reasons. Or some people have land where they've kept the water meter because it costs so much to reinstall it, and they're going to build there someday. We now charge you for that. This RTS fee, you get a monthly fee, even if you have a meter that's not pushing any water through it. Now, I oppose that when we originally for 2 big reasons. First is, if you're not using it, why am I charging you? But second of all, when you build a home, you pay for the meter. So I feel like you've paid for something and we're now trying to charge you for the meter. Now, I understand we'll do maintenance. So, but we've gotten this a lot because now people are seeing it on their bill and understanding, wait, why am I paying this RTS fee? And so what I tell folks is, I'm with you on this one, but I lost, right? But I have tried to work, and I'm going to do it again as we go through the budget this year, to say, if I can't get rid of it, can we at least significantly reduce it? Because it's not a great fee. But I got to get 5 other people to agree with me, and I haven't moved that needle quite yet. There's a few who do. But so I want people to know that I know a lot of people are asking, and I'm working on it, and hopefully we'll get that reduced.
My 2 cents worth
Yeah.
goes back to a thread that I brought to this conversation throughout. Communication, 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 transparency, transparency, transparency. This is a perfect example of a failure by whomever in this city of not giving the public, the taxpayer, an understanding and a time to understand that this is what we're considering. Start phase 1.
Mm-hmm.
2, we're discussing. 3, we're voting. And 4, we're implementing. And here's when. And allow the questions like this to come in front of the decision, not behind the decision.
Yeah.
So that's my input. to
No,
that.
I appreciate that. That's why I always try to raise the red flags before, and then it happens, and I'm like, I tried. And sometimes I'm good at it, and sometimes not so much. Which is why I do these podcasts now. If people listen, hopefully we can get ahead of some of this instead
Let's
of
get it out
always
there.
behind the curve.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate you doing this. This is
Yeah.
excellent. Email number 2. Dear City Council members,
This was sent to everybody. Yeah.
my sidewalks are bad. We all understand that. When are you going to fix them, and how do we get them fixed?
So here's the depressing stat of the day. We just did a comprehensive review of our pedestrian plan, which includes all the sidewalks. And if we could go in today and repair every sidewalk that needs repaired and put in sidewalks in areas that historically haven't had them but should, I think the tab was over $40 million of work to do. So there's a very depressing number. Now, some of those areas may not really need sidewalks. They'd be nice, but they've gone 100 years without them. So, right. And others are areas that sidewalk may not be as bad. But so there's a couple levels to sidewalks. And this is always a contentious back and forth with residents. If it's in front of your house, we have determined that is your sidewalk and you have some responsibility for it. I don't know when that became a thing. Maybe it's always been a thing. Maybe it's new. I don't know. But that is how this city, and to be honest, how most cities, just so everyone knows across the state, view your sidewalk. So if it's broken, what we will tell you is if you want it fixed, we will pay for 50% and you have to pay for 50%. So we do what we call the 50-50 program. So there's the first way. If you really want your sidewalk fixed, you're going to have to put some skin in the game. Now, we also know that there's areas where people simply can't afford to do that, especially with the price of concrete. And some of these sidewalks have reached a point where they are not passable. And so forget just people walking and kids on bikes, which is important, but it's an ADA issue too. And so sometimes if you have an area that's that bad, that's sunken in, totally impassable, I tell people, let me know. We might be able to make that exception for the ADA issue and get that worked in. Even if it's just fixing that little piece, get somebody out there to get it on the list to do. So that's another way to get it fixed. We also have neighborhoods who are doing some projects with money that we get from the federal government and the state that go into the neighborhoods and they through HUD, some of it, and they can assign those to some sidewalks so nobody has to pay and redo them. And we've been doing that. But those are pretty much the only ways we're going to get sidewalks fixed. But I guess the good news is we now have a assessment of the entire pedestrian plan of Topeka. We know what it's going to cost, and we can start building that into our community improvement plan, which is our infrastructure plan every year, to start chipping away at the sidewalks. It's a 10-year plan, so by the time we fix the first ones, they'll start to crumble 10 years later, and we'll start all over, but at least we'll get there maybe. So,
Well, this is one of those things that is a problem with really not an answer that's going to make everybody happy. And the 60% solution could be the 100% answer, and I totally appreciate that. And it is something that, well, you've recognized, and I can tell you when you get $10 million of that $40 million, it's over on Hunt.
I know, you're right. Think about how many of those
There you
sidewalks
go.
we can fix. All right. Well, we wrap up every week with our question of the week. Last week's question was, should we ban roosters in the city of Topeka? Because we have people starting to complain about roosters making all these noises. And the feedback we got online was, don't ban roosters. The majority of people who responded said, don't ban them. there may be an ordinance coming in the next few months from a council person. And so I don't know where I'll go on that, but that helps me. It gives me some early feedback on people's love or distaste of roosters either way. But this week's question, which we always post on our Facebook page at the Civic Circus and on our Instagram page, and you can just go into the comments and answer it, is as we talked about code enforcement. There are a couple cities in Kansas that have started to pass laws that not only make the owner of a property responsible for not all for code enforcement, but sometimes the tenant. Now, I'm not talking about the roof or lack of plumbing or what's truly the responsibility of the landlord. But we are talking about trash citations, not mowing the yard, what I would call those basic level things of just upkeep around the house that sometimes, especially in the summer, all these people not mowing their yards who are renting a place. So some cities have put in laws that said we're going to give that citation to the landlord. We're also going to cite for those kinds of things whoever's living in the home. Mow the lawn, or we're going to cite you too, personally. Some landlords are okay with that because it thinks they motivate then their tenants to actually help maintain the property. I go back and forth on that. I need to do a lot more research on it, and I think it's interesting but also very problematic because I don't want to hurt people for citations they shouldn't get, right? But the question will be, should tenants receive some kind of code violation for issues like trash and mowing? So that will be our question of the week to see what the feedback we get is.
Well, do you want my feedback?
Yeah, no, that's great.
Okay. In my career path, I've had the opportunity to manage, control thousands of rental properties and developments, apartment buildings, houses throughout the United States. And this was back when I was a managing agent for the FDIC and the Resolution Trust Corporation and taking over large financial institutions and dealing with their portfolios. So I want the public to know I'm not just blowing wind. Right. It's actual fact.
It's some actual experience.
Kind of eye-opening. My response to this is no. There's a contract between the tenant and the landlord. It is the landlord's responsibility to apply the contract terms to the tenant. The landlord should get the notice because they own the property. They're responsible for that property. Regardless of who's in there, they're responsible for the property. Landlords, especially slumlords, have a tendency to not want to be responsible for anything other than I want the check and I'm going to put it in the bank and maybe I pay the mortgage, maybe I don't.
And then they blame the tenants.
And then they blame the tenants. Yeah. That's not where it belongs. And we need to have strong tenant-landlord rules. And the landlord association needs to do its job with its landlord oversight. And if a tenant isn't taking care of the property, then they have the right to move them out and move somebody in there that'll take care of it. But if you get a lousy tenant, that's on you. That's not on the city. Yep. That's not on every taxpayer. That's on the guy that owns the property. Yep. However, it goes further than that. Most properties have mortgages. In those mortgages is a clause that tells the lender that the mortgagor, owner of the property, has a responsibility to maintain the integrity of that asset that I loaned on. Yeah. So I didn't loan on something with bricks falling off and a hole in the roof and the grass all. I loaned on this really clean-looking property, and I made you responsible. So you can go right upstream and go to the mortgagor and mortgagee and deal with it on their paper. But no, the tenant has no responsibility to this. Yes, they should be clean, et cetera, but their contract says that. You, the city, aren't responsible to manage their contract. Yeah. But you have options. You can also go one step further. You can go to the federal home loan, the feds up in Kansas City that is the oversight for banks in this area, and you can tell them, we got some assets in a portfolio over here at XYZ Bank that have just crappy properties in their eyesores, and they're devaluating our tax base because property values are going down. They will jump all over them, and they'll come in and tell them to fix it.
That's interesting.
So I'm telling you, there are rules.
That's why we ask the questions.
But the tenant should not be included in that enforcement. I think there's a lawsuit by a tenant if they got code signed. I really do.
Yeah. good.
So there's my answer.
No, I appreciate it. Well, thank you for being here. Tell your wife hello.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting you come here.
This is a wonder.
I had a good
I
time.
wish you all the luck on being the mayor because you're the guy.
Well, we'll see how that one shakes out. If nothing else, everyone needs to go register to vote so you can vote in local elections. As you know, Clark, turnout is always low, and especially in years where there's no other elections going on. So we have to
Money
remind
buys
people.
votes. I
Well, we
mean-
just got to remind people there's an actual election happening, and so they'll show up.
Do I have an opportunity for one comment?
Yep. Here you go.
You
You
sure
can
there's
close us
enough
out.
time?
Yeah, close us out.
Okay. I want to tell Topeka that this is a really great community. And what we need to do is quit trying to be something we aren't. Quit trying to be Manhattan. Quit trying to be Lawrence. Quit trying to be Kansas City. Quit trying to be New York City, Chicago, LA, Hollywood. That's not who we are. Every town has its own personality. This community has a wonderful personality. I told you why I've moved back here. We love it here. It's got its problems, but they're resolvable. Growth for growth's sake is not a good answer, but building the quality of what we have to generate the revenue we need to fund the resources this community needs and its benefits is how you make this work, not by growing, but by upgrading what we've got and supporting it. And what I'm saying is we have a zoo, we have TCT theater, we have TPAC, we have ballet companies, we have the best medical care. I'm telling you, my wife and I use the medical care here, or we go to KU Med Center if they send us there. It's phenomenal. We need to understand that. Education. We have great teachers, great schools, good facilities that are doing the job they can under the mandates they've got. We've got a wonderful university here. We have things for people to do. We have venues for people that want to get into music up in Noto. Two Wolf Studio here, another entrepreneur. Artismo up in Noto and several other venues. There is so much business and opportunity for people who want to be in music or go to a concert or want to just sit around and have a beer and a drink and a sandwich. Look at what's happening downtown. Look at all the new restaurants that have come up and the types of influence they bring and the quality of service. We have it all. We don't have traffic. I can get anywhere in Topeka in 15 minutes. In Kansas City or Denver, places like that, it would take me sometimes an hour to an hour and a half, and then I'd have to sit in the office and wait an hour. You don't have that here. Think of what we've got. Promote the spirit and the personality of Topeka. So what if we aren't fancy? So what if we aren't this go out and party all night and hear the bands? And that's not who Topeka is. I say this respectfully. If that's not your vibe, it's okay to move and go where that vibe makes you happy, because there will be people who want to live like we live in Topeka and enhance this community for what it is. No, we are blessed. I've been everywhere that is different than this, and I'm telling you from experience, we are blessed to live here, and the benefits we have are phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been the Civic Circus. Thank you, everybody.